Hello, my dear students. Once again, welcome to English Made Easy with me, Dipali Rai.
This is the second part of our second series of the sentence, where we shall learn about simple, compound, and complex sentences. But before we go into the details of these three different types of sentences, it is very important to understand clauses, and that is what we are doing now. Well, if you remember, dear students, in our last class, that is part 1 of this second series, we learned that sentences are made up of clauses. Alright? And we also learned that clauses are broadly divided into two types: the main clause and the dependent clause. The main clause or the independent clause, and dependent or the subordinate clause. If you remember, in my last class I had just touched upon the four types of clauses. So the four types of clauses are the main or the independent clause, the dependent or the subordinate clause. Now this dependent or subordinate clause can further be divided into adjective clause, adverb clause, and noun clause. So in total we can say that clauses are of four types. They are the main or the independent clause, the adjective clause, the adverb clause, and noun clause. By now you must have understood the main clause. Alright? And in today's lesson we will move on to the dependent or the subordinate clause. And today we will begin with the adjective or the relative clause in detail. So let us try to understand what is an adjective or a relative clause. Both the adjective and the relative clause, it means the same, right? So an adjective or relative clause is a group of words which contains a subject and a predicate of its own. Alright, so like any other clause, your adjective clause also has a subject and a predicate which includes the verb. Alright, and the adjective clause does the work of an adjective. Okay, what does an adjective do? The function of an adjective is to qualify the noun or the pronoun, isn't it? Alright, similarly, the adjective clause qualifies the noun or the pronoun in the main clause of the sentence. Alright, that is why the adjective or the relative clause depends on the main clause to complete the sense. र आजको लेसनमा adjective अथवा relative clause के हो भनी हामी बुझ्ने प्रयास गर्नेछौँ. Alright? र adjective अथवा relative clause भनेको एउटै हो. Alright? कुनै अरु clause जस्तै relative अथवा adjective clause पनि शब्दहरूको समूह हो जसमा subject अनि predicate दुवै हुन्छ. र predicate मा हामी verb पनि पाउँछौं. र adjective को काम गरेको हुनाले यो clause लाई adjective clause भनिएको हो. र adjective को काम के हो? adjective को function हो noun अथवा pronoun लाई qualify गराउने अथवा बुझाउने. है, noun अथवा pronoun लाई बुझाउने शब्द चाहिँ adjective हो. र adjective ले जसरी noun अथवा pronoun लाई बुझाउँछ त्यसरी नै adjective clause ले main clause मा भएको noun अथवा pronoun लाई बुझाउँछ, qualify गर्छ. Now let's try to follow the pattern in an adjective clause. So an adjective clause, like any other clause, has a subject and a predicate, and the predicate includes the verb. Your adjective clause, also called the relative clause, begins with a relative pronoun or a relative adverb. That is the reason why it is called relative clause. Alright? Since the adjective clause begins with a relative pronoun or a relative adverb, it is also called relative clause. So please remember, your adjective clause begins with relative pronoun or relative adverb. And it is placed next to the noun or pronoun that it qualifies. So if you are to look for your adjective clause, you'll find it just next to the noun or the pronoun in the main clause. Alright? र हामीले adjective clause चिन्नको लागि त्यसको प्याटर्न बुझ्न अनिवार्य छ. Alright? So त्यसको प्याटर्न कस्तो हुन्छ adjective clause को प्याटर्न भन्दा कुनै अरु clause जस्तै adjective clause मा पनि subject र predicate र त्यसमा verb अवश्य हुन्छ. र adjective clause जहिले पनि एउटा relative pronoun अथवा relative adverb बाट सुरु भएको हुन्छ. relative pronoun अथवा relative adverb. त्यसै कारण adjective clause लाई हामी relative clause पनि भन्ने गर्छौं. र adjective clause खोज्नु हो भने सबसे सजिलो पारा हो adjective clause noun अथवा pronoun लाई त्यसले क्वालिफाई गर्छ, त्यसले बुझाउँछ. र adjective clause चाहिँ जहिले पनि noun अथवा pronoun को छेउमा हुन्छ. राइट? र मेन क्लज मा रहेको noun अथवा pronoun को एकदमै नजदिक रहेको clause चाहिँ adjective clause हो. So if we are to identify and understand an adjective clause or a relative clause in a sentence, it is very important to understand that a relative clause begins with a relative pronoun or relative adverbs. So in order to identify your relative clause, you must know what are relative pronouns and relative adverbs. Okay, because your relative clause begins with either your relative pronoun or relative adverb. So what are relative pronouns? So words like who, whom, what, whose, which, that are relative pronouns. And words like when, where, how, why are relative adverbs. Alright? So these words like who, whom, what, whose, which, that, when, where, how, why begins your relative clause, and that is the reason why your adjective clause is also called relative clause. Alright? र हामीले एउटा adjective clause अथवा relative clause लाई बुझ्न अनि चिन्नको लागि हामीले यो बुझ्न पर्छ कि relative clause relative pronoun अथवा relative adverb बाट सुरु हुन्छ. र त्यसको लागि हामीले relative pronoun र relative adverb चाहिँ कुन शब्दहरूलाई भनिन्छ त्यो बुझ्न जरुरी छ. र शब्द जस्तै who, whom, what, whose, which, that लाई हामी relative pronoun भन्छौं. र शब्द जस्तै when, where, how, why आदिलाई हामी relative adverb भन्छौं. र यस्ता शब्दहरू जस्तै who, whom, what, whose, which, that, when, where, how, why यी शब्दहरूबाट सुरु भएको clause लाई हामी relative clause अथवा adjective clause भन्छौं. Okay, now let's quickly learn the usage of these words, the relative adverbs and relative pronouns, how we can use them in our sentences. So relative pronouns like who, whom, whoever, whomever are used to describe persons. All right, they are used to give the description of people. And words like which, that are used to refer to things or animals. र हामीले यो relative pronoun र relative adverb को प्रयोग चाहिँ बुझ्न जरुरी छ. र शब्द जस्तै who, whom, whoever, whomever चाहिँ हामीले कुनै व्यक्तिलाई describe गर्दा use गर्छौं. Alright? र शब्द जस्तै which, that यिनीहरू चाहिँ हामीले कुनै पशु अथवा चीजको विवरण या डिस्क्रिप्सन दिँदा हामीले यो शब्द प्रयोग गर्छौं. Likewise, the relative adverb when is used to describe time, where to describe a place, and why to give a reason, right? र हामीले relative adverb जस्तै when लाई समयको विवरण अथवा डिस्क्रिप्सन दिनुलाई युज गर्छौं. where कुनै जग्गाको विवरण दिनुलाई युज गर्छौं र why चाहिँ कुनै कारण बताउनको लागि हामी त्यो सेन्टेन्समा प्रयोग गर्छौं. I'll give you one more tip to identify an adjective or a relative clause, and that is with the help of these questions. All right, the relative clause answers the question what kind, how many, which one. All right, so the clause answers the question what kind, how many, which one. र कुनै सेन्टेन्समा रहेको एडजेक्टिभ अथवा रिलेटिभ क्लजलाई यी प्रश्नको माध्यमद्वारा चिन्हित गरिन सकिन्छ र ती प्रश्नहरू हुन् what kind, how many, which one. भन्नुको मतलब एउटा एडजेक्टिभ अथवा रिलेटिभ क्लजले यी प्रश्नहरूको उत्तर दिन्छ. Now let us try to understand the adjective or relative clause with the help of some examples. Right? Let's take the first sentence. God helps those who help themselves. So you can find two clauses out here. One is God helps those, and the other is who help themselves. So if we take the first clause, God helps those, that is the main clause because the sentence is complete in itself and it doesn't need any support of any other clause to complete the sense. All right, and you have the subject, that is God, helps those, the predicate. Here helps those means helps those people. All right, so that is the predicate, and in the predicate we have the verb helps. All right, so this is the main clause. Now the second clause, who help themselves. All right, if you look at this clause, it too has a subject who, help themselves the predicate, and the verb help. So it has a subject as well as a predicate which includes the verb. But if we separate it as a separate sentence, it doesn't make a complete sense. It doesn't give complete sense. Who help themselves? What are we talking about, isn't it? So in order to complete the sense, we need the help of the main clause. Okay? So if we take the main clause, God helps those, all right, then we get a clear idea that God helps those who help themselves. So who help themselves is a subordinate clause or a dependent clause because it depends on the main clause for the completion of its sense. And this clause, the subordinate clause, who help themselves, is an adjective clause, or we can also call it the relative clause because it begins with the relative pronoun who. All right, so the subordinate clause we have in this sentence is a relative or an adjective clause. And how can we say it? Because it begins with the relative pronoun who. Okay, let's analyze the second sentence. I know the time when the train will arrive. All right, so in this sentence again we find two clauses out here. I know the time, and the other is when the train will arrive. So if you take the first clause, I know the time, all right, that is a clause that can stand on its own as a simple sentence. It has the subject I, all right, the predicate know the time, which includes the verb know. right? And if we take it as an independent sentence, it can stand on its own, giving us complete sense. So it is the main clause of the sentence. So now let's take the second clause in the sentence, when the train will arrive. If you take it separately, we'll see that it cannot stand on its own to complete the sense, isn't it? It doesn't give us complete sense, all right, as to what the sentence is about. When the train will arrive, what about it, isn't it? All right, so we need the main clause to complete the sense of the clause here. So such a clause which needs the help of the main clause to complete the sense is called your dependent or your subordinate clause. So this dependent or subordinate clause begins with the word when, which is a relative adverb. So when the train will arrive is an example of your relative clause or adjective clause. Now let's analyze the third sentence. The dog that barks does not bite. All right. So in this sentence, let's try to find out the main clause and the subordinate clause. So the dog does not bite. We can separate it as one clause, and the other clause we have is that barks. All right. So the dog does not bite. As a clause, can it stand on its own? Yes, it is independent. So this we can take as the main clause of the sentence. All right, now let's take the second clause in the sentence, that barks. All right, so if we take that barks as a sentence, does it make complete sense? No, isn't it? All right, it doesn't give the complete meaning of the sentence. So the clause needs the help of the main clause to complete its sense. So such a clause is called the subordinate clause. And since it answers the question, which one, we can say that the clause is relative or adjective clause. All right. So which one does not bite? The one that barks. र अझै एउटा सेन्टेन्सलाई हामी एनालाइज गरौँ. The book which is on the table is mine. र यो सेन्टेन्समा दुईटा क्लज हामी भेट्न सक्छौँ र ती दुई क्लजहरू हुन् the book is mine एउटा क्लज भयो, अर्को हो which is on the table. र यो दुई क्लजहरू हामीले अलग अलग लियौं भने the book is mine स्वतन्त्र रूपले आफ्नैमा उभ्न सक्छ एउटा कम्प्लिट माने लिएर एउटा सिम्पल सेन्टेन्सको रूपमा र यसै कारण हामी यो क्लजलाई मेन क्लज अथवा इन्डिपेन्डेन्ट क्लज मान्न सक्छौं. हामी दोस्रो क्लजलाई लियौं which is on the table र यो क्लज आफैमा उभिन सक्दैन. यो क्लजले पूर्ण मानिदिनुको लागि मेन क्लज माथि निर्भर पर्छ र यस्तो क्लज जो स्वतन्त्र रूपले उभिन सक्दैन र मेन क्लज माथि आफ्नो मानि पूर्ण गर्नको लागि निर्भर पर्छ, यस्तो क्लजलाई हामी सबअर्डिनेट अथवा डिपेन्डेन्ट क्लज भन्छौं. सो which is on the table चाहिँ डिपेन्डेन्ट अथवा सबअर्डिनेट क्लज हो. यो सबअर्डिनेट क्लज which is on the table, which शब्द जो एउटा रिलेटिभ प्रोनाउन हो त्योबाट सुरु भएकोले गर्दा हामीले यो क्लजलाई रिलेटिभ क्लज अथवा एडजेक्टिभ क्लज भन्न सक्छौं. लास्ट अझै एउटा इक्जाम्पल हेरौं. The reason why he resigned is not known. राइट र यसमा रहेको क्लजेसहरू हामीले छुट्याउँ. The reason is not known एउटा क्लज भयो र अर्को क्लज why he resigned र the reason is not known लाई हामीले अलगै लियौं भने यो एउटा पूर्ण सिम्पल सेन्टेन्सको रूपमा उभिन सक्छ र यसलाई हामी इन्डिपेन्डेन्ट अथवा मेन क्लज भन्न सक्छौं. तर दोस्रो क्लज why he resigned एउटा पूर्ण सेन्टेन्सको रूपमा स्वतः उभिन सक्दैन र यसले आफ्नो माने पूर्ण गर्नको लागि मेन क्लज माथि निर्भर पर्छ त्यसैकारण हामीले why he resigned लाई सबअर्डिनेट क्लज मान्न सक्छौं र यो डिपेन्डेन्ट क्लज एउटा रिलेटिभ एडभर्ब why ले सुरु भएकोले गर्दाखेरि हामीले यो क्लजलाई रिलेटिभ क्लज वा adjective clause manna sakchau. So before we end today, let's find out how much you have understood from today's lesson. Alright, so we are going to have a short mock test, so for which you need to have a pen and paper ready. Alright, so please get your pen and paper ready. So I shall read out the questions for you and you can take it down on your paper, and as you finish copying down the questions, you can pause the video for some time and work out on the test given. And as soon as you finish your test, you can continue with the video where I shall give you the answers and you can evaluate yourself. So here's your test. You have to fill in the blanks with suitable relative pronouns or relative adverbs, and then circle the relative clause or the adjective clause in the sentence. र नानीहरु तिमीहरुलाई यो दिएको fill in the blanks मा relative pronoun अथवा relative adverb ले खाली ठाउँ भर्नु पर्छ, अनि यो sentence मा रहेको relative clause अथवा adjective clause लाई चिनेर encircle गर्न पर्छ. So let me read out the questions for you. Number 1, I know the place dash he was born. Number 2, do you know the reason dash the schools are closed? Number 3, the boy dash car was stolen went to the police. Number 4, students dash work hard get good marks. Number 5, all dash glitters is not gold. So just pause the video till you work it out, and as soon as you finish with your work, you can play along, and then I shall give you the answers so that you can evaluate yourselves. So if you are done, let's check the answers. Number 1, I know the place where he was born. And where he was born is the relative clause. Number 2, it's do you know the reason why the schools are closed? Alright, and here the relative clause is why the schools are closed. Number 3, the boy whose car was stolen went to the police. So the relative clause here is whose car was stolen. Number 4, students who work hard get good marks. And the relative clause here is who work hard. And finally, number 5, all that glitters is not gold. And the relative or the adjective clause here is that glitters. So my dear students, that is the end of our mock test, and I hope you have evaluated yourselves. So if you score 5 on 5, well, that's very good. 4 upon 5, well, that's satisfactory. But if you get 3 or less than 3, I feel you seriously must go over the lesson once again. Would definitely like to know your scores, so you can put your scores in the comment box below. So see you in my next class where we shall learn about the adverb clause. And please don't forget to like, share and subscribe.